Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of the most turbulent origin stories I've stumbled across, surrounding a grocery store chain that some of you may be familiar with, but is probably unknown to most of you outside of the southeastern United States, Winn-Dixie. This story follows the journey of a man named William Davis, an entrepreneur who faced one failure after another, ranging from financial ruin to legal trouble, in order to make his dream of a supermarket empire a reality. If you're ready to hear more, then pull up a seat and relax as we dive into a story about the grit, sweat, and many controversies that led to the birth of one of America's major grocery market chains. Winn-Dixie first started out as a humble general store in 1914, created by a man from Burley, Idaho named William Milton Davis. William was born in Texas in the year 1880, and shortly after his birth, his father decided to move the family out to Arkansas to start a new life. As a boy, William learned the ins and outs of running a business while helping his father manage the general store that his family owned. At the age of 24, he decided to try his hand at starting his own business, and with his father's help, he created his own store in a neighboring town called Henderson. After some time, he and his brother Carl decided to take a chance in Idaho, as they'd heard that there were lots of opportunities for growth in their industry. Once there, the brothers started out working as employees at a place called Clark Mercantile General Store, and eventually they were able to raise enough money to actually purchase the store, renaming it Davis Mercantile after their last name. The business wound up being extremely successful and allowed them to expand the small general store to an 8,250 square foot location that they named Davis Department Store. There, they were able to offer more goods to their customers, ranging from food items to clothing. Customers loved the benefits that the store offered, such as selling items for credit instead of cash, along with a home delivery service. Those benefits, combined with the brothers' positive reputations, caused the small store to soar, and in just a few years, the brothers grew the business from just $30,000 in annual sales to over $300,000. Unfortunately, the highs of running a successful business started to run out as competitors began to take root in the community the Davis brothers had long been a pillar of. One of these businesses was a new chain of stores called Skaggs Cash Store, which embraced the model of cash-only purchases instead of relying on credit. Because Skaggs was offering goods in exchange for cash, this allowed them to be more competitive when it came to pricing their items, and also allowed them to offer a wider selection of products to their customers. Along with the competition from Skaggs, beginning in the 1920s, the Davis brothers were unfortunately also hit with a tragedy that would take most of America by storm in the form of a major recession. Idaho was a state that was largely built on an agriculture-based economy, and unfortunately once the recession hit, farmers and other customers found themselves unable to pay off the massive amounts of debt they had accumulated at the Davis department store. As a result, the brothers were unable to pay off the tens of thousands of dollars of merchandise they had purchased on credit, and were eventually forced to let the business fall to their creditors. Following some advice from his brother Carl, in 1925, William decided to leave Idaho behind and move out to Miami, Florida, where he borrowed $10,000 from his father in order to start a new venture. After surveying the surrounding area, William decided to visit a local business by the name of Rockmore Grocery. Even though the business wasn't listed for sale, he felt confident that he could make an offer that the store owner wouldn't be able to refuse. While hesitant at first, the owner was eventually persuaded by the $10,000 cash offer William had on hand, and eventually gave him the deed. After William took over, the business continued to thrive, especially because he learned not to offer items on credit after this caused the failure of his previous business. In fact, William was so against offering items for credit that he threatened to fire any employees if he learned that they were allowing customers to use the practice. Because William kept in touch with the vendors that he used at his previous business, he was able to provide fresh products from Idaho, such as potatoes, that Florida hadn't yet incorporated into their stores. He also focused on providing high-quality local goods, such as fresh produce, dairy, and meat from local farms, with one big exception: beef products. These products he imported from out west, as he felt that they were higher quality than what he could find locally. His wife Ethel also helped with the business by baking homemade pies that were all a hit with customers, and over time, the shop grew to the point that two of his sons, James and Artemis, left school in order to assist their father with daily operations. Now, while William was happy with the success of this location, his ultimate dream was to have a successful line of retail businesses, so within less than a year, he began to look into adding new locations. His first several attempts unfortunately resulted in failure, but because William was able to recognize early on when a location wasn't going to work out, this allowed him to quickly pivot to opening a new location instead of making the common mistake of sinking more funds to save the failing ones. Finally, one of these shops showed promise, and eventually grew to the point that he was able to use the profits to finance even more locations. This new line of stores was renamed to Table Supply, which continued to thrive throughout the rest of the 1920s and into the 1930s. William made sure that each new location followed the same identical layout that he planned for the original, and made sure to focus on having only 3 main departments for customers to shop from: meats, common groceries, and fresh produce. He also focused on making the store aesthetically pleasing and easily accessible for customers, such as incorporating items like refrigerated cases, wide aisles, low shelves, and pyramid displays. He also continued to focus on selling quality products, especially Western beef, which wound up becoming one of the best sellers due to the low pricing they were able to offer customers. For context, the majority of meat markets would sell their steaks at around 60 to 85 cents a pound, whereas William was able to offer his steaks at just 19 cents a pound. This caused customers to start referring to Table Supply as the Beef People, which in the future would eventually become the store's well-known mantra. Although things with Table Supply were going well, it was only a matter of time before conflict would rear its ugly head, this time in the form of jealousy from competitors. This all started when William's son Artemis decided to launch an advertising campaign claiming that Table Supply offered the same steaks as other grocers but at a substantially cheaper price. This was the final tipping point that led to their competitors filing multiple lawsuits against the company. They claimed that the beef William offered was not at all the same as what they offered, which is pretty silly for a number of reasons, especially considering the fact that Table Supply was known for providing high-quality beef. These competitors were essentially saying, hey, the beef we're offering customers is not only lower quality, but we're also charging triple the price for it. Luckily, Table Supply won all of the lawsuits against them, and once newspapers advertised this fact, more and more customers found out about their cheaper prices and actually started switching to Table Supply for their purchases. In 1931, Davis decided to expand the business by purchasing another grocery chain called Lively Stores. This purchase added 28 new Table Supply locations for just $10 grand. Quite a steal considering the first store he purchased to begin this new venture cost him roughly the same amount.
What a deal!
This new chain extended all across Florida from where it began in Miami all the way to Tampa. In the following year, they added an additional 10 locations in the Orlando area through the acquisition of a chain called B&B Stores. Unfortunately, right when Table Supply was becoming a booming success, William suddenly fell ill during a church service, which resulted in him requiring emergency abdominal surgery the following day. Sadly, the surgery wasn't a success, and he passed away at age 54 due to complications from the operation, combined with heart disease just 1 week after the surgery. After his passing, the business fell into the hands of his 4 sons, Artemis, James, Milton, and Tyne, with James taking the helm as chairman. The business continued to grow after William's passing, but shortly after James took over, he and the rest of the Davis brothers were almost immediately hit with their first challenge. Due to the massive growth Table Supply had had over the years, independent shop owners, along with politicians, were beginning to view the business along with other chains as contributing to the recession. Their reasoning was because independent shops couldn't compete with the pricing and selection that chains were able to, this resulted in smaller shops struggling to see profit. As a result, in April 1935, Senator Henry C. Tillman of Hillsborough County introduced the Florida Recovery Act with the goal of banning all chain stores from Florida. Surprisingly, many people actually jumped on board with the idea and supported the act to the point that the debate was widely publicized in both printed media and radio editorials. If successful, Table Supply and all the locations they just opened would be forced to close and go out of business. Thankfully, multiple chains, including Table Supply, brought out their best lawyers and vehemently fought against the bill. After a long and heated battle, the chains finally emerged victorious, but unfortunately not unscathed. Even though the Florida Recovery Act failed, new licensing fees and gross receipt taxes were put into play, ones that specifically targeted and punished chain stores. All chain stores that were considered part of the highest tax bracket, which included Table Supply, would be forced to pay a $400 license fee per store, plus a 5% tax on gross sales. For comparison, if Table Supply was an individual store, they would only have to pay a $10 license fee for that one store and a 0.5% tax on gross sales. To combat this new string of fees, the Davis brothers got to work and eventually founded the Florida Chain Store Association, which was designed to help retail chains fight against the new license and tax fees, along with any other anti-business laws that targeted chain businesses. Their first legal battle would actually be upon the return of the Florida Recovery Act, which decided to rear its head once again in 1937, like a stubborn weed the Davis brothers thought they had finally taken care of. The difference this time, though, is that the bill's main goal was to not only remove all chains from Florida, but also forbid any non-residents from owning any businesses that operated inside of Florida. Luckily, this act once again failed once it reached the Senate, and as the Great Depression began to slowly subside, the Davis brothers were able to get back into the swing of things and start taking the business to new heights. In 1939, the Davis brothers saw an opportunity to grow the company in the form of a chain of 78 grocery stores owned by business partners Bill Lovett and E. L. Winn. The brothers initially purchased 51% of the chain, but after seeing the success of their first acquisition, they proceeded to purchase the remainder of the company in 1944. They then merged these new stores into their previous table supply chain and then rebranded the entire line of stores under the Winn and Lovett name. After this merger, the brothers went on a rampage, gobbling up even more grocery store chains, such as Stuyden Store, that was a company local to Kentucky, and Margaret Ann Stores, which was another Florida-based grocery line similar to their initial investment. This brought the total number of Winn and Lovett locations to a total of 160, and in 1952, the company became the very first Florida-based industrial corporation to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Even after all of this momentum, the four Davis brothers were not done yet. Over the next 2 years, the company purchased other grocery store chains, such as the Jitney Jungle Stores located in Alabama, Penny Stores located in Mississippi, and Ballantine Stores and Eden Stores located in South Carolina. They also launched an entirely new brand of stores and products under the name QuickChek, whose logo wound up becoming the origin of the iconic checkmark symbol later seen in Winn-Dixie's logo. This new brand wound up being so successful that over time, all current and future table supply stores were rebranded to QuickChek locations. In 1955, after acquiring a large chain of 117 new locations that were originally called Dixie Home Stores, the company decided to once again rebrand the business under the new name that many of us are familiar with today, Winn-Dixie. This brought the company's locations to a grand total of almost 400 stores, most of which were located all along the southeast, but eventually expanded out west to states like Texas and New Mexico, and even outside of the states into the Bahamas. By the 1970s, the company was so profitable that they attracted the attention of another successful entrepreneur by the name of Sam Walton, a name many of you are probably familiar with due to his creation of one of the biggest grocery store juggernauts of all time, Walmart. He joined their board of directors in 1981, and in 1984, he helped the Winn-Dixie Company open their first Winn-Dixie Marketplace location that followed the growing trend of superstores that were becoming popular in the 80s. This building was a massive facility spanning over 45,000 square feet and was officially located in Valdosta, Georgia. Sam Walton eventually stepped down from the board in 1986, and unfortunately, in the years following his departure, the company began to show some signs of struggle. Winn-Dixie faced increased competition from not just rival traditional grocers, but also superstores such as Walmart and Costco, which functioned as all-in-one businesses that allowed customers to find everything they needed at one location instead of having to visit multiple stores. Even smaller businesses like convenience stores were causing trouble for the brand, as these shops were able to exist in close proximity to neighborhoods, unlike supermarkets. On top of the struggles of staying profitable, Winn-Dixie also suffered a loss in the form of losing the last surviving Davis brother, Andrew Dano Davis, who eventually passed away in June of 1995. A few months later, in October, 22 Winn-Dixie locations in Georgia faced legal trouble when it was revealed that they were knowingly selling expired food to customers, something that's actually illegal in the state of Georgia. And this wasn't something like expired breakfast cereals or dried goods, things that can sometimes be stretched past their expiration date. These were items like dairy, meat, fresh produce, and other products, a far cry from the high-quality products William Davis built the brand's legacy on. They were fined a total of $28,000 by the Georgia Department of Agriculture for violating the Georgia Food Act, which regulates all areas of food operations from warehousing to retail. Along with these expired products, health inspectors also noted multiple sanitation violations, ranging from stockrooms that were clearly not being cleaned regularly to dirty equipment that was used to process food items. Funny enough, this was actually not even the first time some of these stores were noted as having these violations. 4 of the stores that were fined had also been cited for the exact same type of violations just 3 years before this incident occurred. As a result, all 22 stores were placed on 2 years probation, where if they were discovered to still be in violation of the Department of Agriculture's orders, they'd be fined an additional $1,000 per store. In response to the fines, Mickey Clerk, Winn-Dixie's Vice President of Public Relations, said the chain has taken steps to ensure that out-of-date products are pulled from shelves. He was stated as saying, "We have instituted a program throughout the company which says we will pay customers $1 if they find a product which has an out-of-date sell-by date," said Clerk. "We have also instituted plans to reinforce our policies on rotation." Following this incident, in order to try to combat the financial losses along with damage to the brand's reputation, Winn-Dixie looked into many possible solutions, such as closing underperforming locations and remodeling those that were profitable. If they were unable to remodel one of the profitable stores, they would close the store entirely and simply open a new, modernized one close to the old location. Unfortunately, this practice wound up becoming an issue later on, as the company would often sign multi-decade leases. This meant that any time they closed a store, they would still have to pay rent on the empty lot unless they were able to find someone else to sublease it. It was reported that in 1994 alone, the company spent $650 million to either renovate existing marketplaces or open new stores entirely. Luckily, this endeavor paid off as their gross revenue practically doubled from $8 billion to $14 billion between the years 1980 to 1999. In November 1999, Kroger, who was at the time the largest supermarket chain in the U.S., announced its intention to purchase 74 Winn-Dixie locations in Texas and Oklahoma. If the sale went through, Kroger would own over one-third of all supermarket sales in Fort Worth, Texas. Due to competitive concerns that would lead to issues with customers, the Federal Trade Commission voted to block the sale. The FTC released a statement saying, "The transaction as proposed would combine Fort Worth's second and third largest supermarket chains to create a new dominant firm in Fort Worth. As a result of this merger, consumers would lose the benefit of more than 20 years of head-to-head competition between Kroger and Winn-Dixie." Another concern was that due to the locations of some Kroger supermarkets being relatively close to Winn-Dixie stores, Kroger could use this acquisition to close any Winn-Dixies that they felt were too close to their Kroger outlets. This would force customers to have no choice but to shop at Kroger and pay whatever prices the company wanted to charge for their goods. As a result of these concerns, the FTC unanimously voted to block the sale in June of 2000, and Kroger later released a statement saying that they have decided to terminate the acquisition. Something that I thought was pretty funny, because it's not like they would have been able to go through with the sale anyways due to the FTC. After this deal was canceled, Winn-Dixie was forced to undergo a major restructuring to their business model. Remember how earlier we talked about Sam Walton serving as a board member until 1986? Well, him stepping down was partly so he could focus on the growth of Walmart, which was rapidly becoming a force to reckon with. This increased competition caused Winn-Dixie to face losses both financially and in the overall market, which led them to announce in April of 2000 that they would be cutting 11,000 jobs and closing 114 of their stores throughout Tampa, Atlanta, and Louisville. This also included a warehouse they owned in Tampa, multiple factories that operate out of Jacksonville, and several offices throughout the aforementioned cities. Along with the closures, they announced that 10 of their company vice presidents would also be receiving early retirement. Their hope was that these closures would allow them the freedom to use their resources to modernize the remaining locations in order to compete with Walmart. Later that year, they also attempted to branch out and acquire not just grocery stores, but also gas stations and liquor stores that were currently owned by Jitney Jungle. Their goal was to purchase 72 of Jitney Jungle's stores for $85 million, but similarly to the Kroger acquisitions, FTC once again stepped in and forced them to limit the sale to 68 stores, citing concerns over competition in the states of Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. Even with this acquisition, unfortunately, Winn-Dixie's profits continued to plummet, as just 2 years later, in May of 2002, they announced that due to increased competition from competitors, they were closing additional stores in Texas and Oklahoma, resulting in 5,300 of their employees losing their jobs. In April 2004, they announced that they were also closing an additional 156 stores and cutting 10,000 positions throughout their locations. By October, they were once again forced to sell over 50 other stores to competitors, and by February of the following year, they officially threw in the towel and filed for bankruptcy. Now, before we get into the aftermath of the bankruptcy, I'd like to take a brief detour to talk about a movie released during this time that was inspired by the Winn-Dixie name. It technically doesn't have anything to do with the brand directly. However, the author of the book the film is based off of wanted to incorporate the name of the grocery store, as the story is based around a small town in Florida, which is Winn-Dixie's birthplace. Because of Winn-Dixie is a children's book that was released in March of 2000 that was eventually released as a film in 2005. The story follows a 10-year-old girl by the name of India Opal Baloney, who along with her father is forced to move to a trailer park in a small town named Naomi, Florida. One day, while visiting a local supermarket, aka Winn-Dixie, she comes across a stray dog inside the store who is causing trouble for the employees. She decides to adopt the dog as her own and names him after the grocery store. The novel is a bittersweet coming-of-age story that follows Opal adventures with Winn-Dixie and the residents of Naomi, Florida. I read it when I was about Opal's age and also watched the film adaptation when it came out. Both of them were pretty good, and I still recommend checking them out to this day, although I definitely prefer the book over the film. Now, let's get back to where we left off with Winn-Dixie's unfortunate current financial struggle. The bankruptcy forced the company to look into making more adjustments to store operations in order to stem the bleeding. They severely cut back on store operating hours, resulting in them no longer being open 24/7. Sadly, they also announced the closure of 326 stores, the elimination of 22,000 store positions, and 500 corporate employee positions. They also removed all stores located in North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and parts of Georgia. After all was said and done, Winn-Dixie now owned and operated less stores than they had back in the 1950s. At this point, most people would probably see the writing on the wall and call it quits. But once again, Winn-Dixie refused to give up, and in June 2006, they announced they had a new financial plan moving forward. They were eventually able to drop their Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in November, and were actually noted to be in a much better place financially. However, as time moved on, this wound up not being enough to save the business, as just a few years later, in July of 2010, they announced a further closure of 30 underperforming stores. And in 2011, they finally agreed to a deal with Bilo, one of their competitors, who purchased Winn-Dixie as a whole for $530 million. Along with agreeing to the price tag, part of the deal allowed Winn-Dixie to operate as a subsidiary of Bilo, which meant that Winn-Dixie stores could continue operating under the Winn-Dixie name. Sadly, even with this acquisition, even Bilo couldn't seem to save the dying brand, as over the years, more and more Winn-Dixie stores were either closed or sold off to competitors. Once again, while under their parent company Southeastern Grocers, Winn-Dixie was forced to file for bankruptcy in 2018, and even though they are able to recover briefly, they were once more hit continuously with financial struggles, which eventually resulted in the sale of Southeastern Grocers in its entirety to Aldi. Later on, Aldi sold the company to a group of private investors that included C&S Wholesale Grocers. For those unfamiliar with C&S, they're a supplier that was founded back in 1918 that had begun seeking expansion into grocery retail. This sale meant that all remaining Winn-Dixie locations would eventually be converted to Aldi stores, with completion of the conversion expected to finish in 2027. Sadly, the only trace left behind of the Winn-Dixie brand will eventually be just its name, as their former parent company, Southeastern Grocers, announced that they would be changing their name to the Winn-Dixie Company in the beginning of 2026. As someone who grew up going to these stores, it's been pretty sad watching them slowly decline over the years, especially the stores managed by people who decided to abandon William Davis's philosophy on providing quality products in a customer-friendly environment. Recently, one Florida location was found to have over 20 health code violations, including live roaches seen crawling around the bakery and an open container of a product called butt paste discovered inside a sandwich prep station. If you're unfamiliar with what butt paste is, it's an ointment used to treat things like diaper rash, jock itch, chafing, and other skin-irritating conditions. Definitely not the kind of condiment you want to risk getting spread on your sandwich. Along with these violations, it was found that the store was keeping seafood, poultry, and other meat products at unsafe temperatures. Equipment used to slice deli meats would go unclean for days, and inspectors found open packages of deli meats that were not only expired, but had also just exceeded the 7-day shelf limit. I can't imagine the look on William's face if he were to hear of this long list of violations. I'm guessing that, considering the fact that he threatened to fire employees for violating his cash-only policy, he'd probably just go on a massive firing spree and close the location entirely. While Winn-Dixie's presence is becoming a thing of the past, the store put into play a number of revolutionary practices that are now pretty commonplace in grocery stores today, such as how products are displayed, and allowing customers to shop for items themselves instead of waiting for a shop hand to retrieve and deliver them. The company can also be credited for their contributions to minority-based programs and institutions, such as donating millions of dollars to historically black colleges. Although the name Winn-Dixie Marketplace may be no more, these financial contributions have gone on to assist those that will hopefully outlive the brand and create new legacies for generations to come. Well, kind of a bittersweet story. I hope you all have enjoyed learning about this company today, and if you're someone like myself who has experience shopping there, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the business closing and any memories you have of shopping there in the comments below. If you have any ideas for businesses that you'd like me to cover, feel free to also leave a comment, and you might see your suggestion in a future video. With all that being said, I appreciate you guys checking out my very first upload on this channel, and I'd also appreciate if you could subscribe if you're interested in hearing more business backstories, turn on notifications so you don't miss an upload, and also help me out by dropping a like, which will let me know you guys vibe with the content. I hope you all have a great day out there, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.